Oh, welcome here in Spreaker.com in the Voice from Heaven and also live on YouTube. I hope you have a good transmission and can hear me pretty well. And yeah, welcome in our remembrance of 3 days to awakening. And as we are here in the eighth episode, we want to extend it a little bit as we were looking the last time at on still only first action of mind, first day, and we were looking at more detailed at this first action of mind of finding this necessary step of willingness in order to let all illusions be removed, and also let this confusion of mind, confusing thoughts of separation, because everything that determines and shows us separation is, of course, subject to confusion. And finding already that at least the recognition what's going on and the necessity to undo that. And we want to broaden that a little bit today also in which are aspects of the first and second action of mind, that first and second day, really finding or making an emphasis on making a decision in the demonstration of willingness for the undoing process, which is okay, I'm ready now. I'm ready for a completely new way of seeing that. I'm ready for a new thought system, isn't it? And this is really why we are doing A Course in Miracles. I'm still teaching A Course in Miracles, though in this series of 3 days to awakening, I will use these articles or these parts of these unpublished um, excerpts about these 3 days in the full transformation of our mind. And as we always were reviewing and remembering that in that first day of coming here, second day of being here and becoming willing and determined for the change, and the third day of simply leaving time space. And leaving time space means to see everything from the awakened perspective, to see everything as the Holy Spirit sees it. And on the first day of just coming here, of course, it is a kind of an experience of a shock and of devastation, of feeling the pain of separation and feeling the pain of not being in contact with source, with God, and trying to and seeing that action of trying to find the solution anywhere but within ourselves. No? That is already an immense accomplishment that is given by Jesus Christ and through the Course in Miracles, that we actually see that the power is truly in our mind and is us, and is part of the creation that we in which we were created, that we are. And so every perspective, every idea of the little self, as it is called, the little self, the self concept, that's where the ego is still very strong. And of course, we all are here to look at how we made the ego, what the ego is still trying to challenge and tempt us within our own mind, and just no longer listen to that, or to really stand up and say, who is in charge here? Who is the ruler of the universe? And that claiming that, okay, I am, this is my mind, I am in charge here, is also a goodbye, ego thoughts. I will no longer follow you. And of course, we know these moments where it really grabs the mind, and it's there is just no door visible of getting out of that. And those are the dark experiences within our transformation in which we kind of lose it, or lose that connection. But all that, remember that always, because it's very important, all that is a choice. There is no such thing as darkness or an obscure force that kind of catches the consciousness. This is a choice to see and to experience oneself like this. And that is exactly what makes up the I thought, that sense of I am existing here in time space. I am separate from you. I'm separate from the universe. I'm separate from my own holiness. I'm separate from God. And all what we were already looking at, that the entire basis is fear. It's all fear based, and it's all self-made. It's all self-hallucinated. It's all self-fabrication. So including here already in the necessity of this day two, of being here with a perspective of a change, with a perspective of a different experience, with a perspective of seeing a glimpse of the light, right? And first, even feeling the devastation of this place, the devastation of the havoc that the ego has done in our minds. No? And then realizing and recognizing it doesn't need to be that way. I am in charge here, and because I have all the power of decision is my own. Of course, I can choose, I can decide to see this differently. I can decide to no longer stand and wallow in the grievance of that place of separation, but really say, no, there is a light, and this is my choice to be and to experience myself. I do know better. There was a moment of revelatory experience in my mind, and therefore I'm not forgetting who I truly am. I'm willing to remember. I'm willing to relive that transformation that Jesus calls it in the course very consciously a reawakening. It is an awakening in that very moment by using this, what I call a crucial turning point, where the human consciousness has finally enough of this, is finally becoming aware of this slaughterhouse within one's own imagination of that what appearance is, a world of appearances, a world perceived by the sensory organs. And that trap, is is this cycle of death, this cycle of misery, sickness, and death. And where's their life? That is then the question. And so at some point, we have to acknowledge that life is not this. Life is not found in the appearances of the world. In the appearances of the world, I see reflected the impossibility of me or of my mind to manage the situation, to manage my own ideas, my own thought forms. And if that impossibility is admitted, and I hope listening here to me, or we are one mind, right? I'm talking to myself, is that acknowledgement of, okay, that my decision is really one of I don't want this anymore. My decision is one of turning to a higher power, of asking for help, of asking for a corrective device, of asking for an undoing process that is orchestrated beyond my own small little mind, right? My own um, solutions I have brought along with and have accumulated and tried, that I would be capable to manage my affairs, to manage my world. And of course, we all have successfully failed in that. I can say that, or you wouldn't be here. No? And you are me in that sense. We are one, and we are sharing that remembrance that we failed to manage the world with our self-made solutions from the past. And that brought us literally onto our knees, or brought us pray and direct our mind to God Himself, to His mind, to the Holy Spirit's guidance, and to ask to be guided by allowing a healing, a correction to take place. And often this isn't really recognized in the situation itself. I've just recently heard about this story where um, the man who has worked for a company for many, many years. And then there came the point, because he wasn't happy in the situation, and more conflicts came up. And then he was fired, right? And he was escorted out of the building. And at the building's exit door, he kind of was in such a devastation that he really asked the Holy Spirit, "What is this? Please help me." Does that need to be exactly how it looks like? And the answer that he received was, "This is the answer, what you were asking for." So sometimes we don't realize that, and we don't recognize that situations that don't look so funny, or they are experienced completely in devastation, are actually exactly what opens up to a new experience, to a new way of living, to new mission and assignments, we could say, in order to serve, right? How can we extend this message? How can we serve the Holy Spirit? And of course, those are uncountable forms and ways. I always say it's completely personal. It is really just a matter of asking and of listening. And if we are capable, and of course we are capable, to listen to the Holy Spirit's voice, we will be guided very personally and very directly towards the undoing, because that was also part of the voice that man heard. Well, you were not happy there, so why don't you look for something where you can experience a more consistent happiness? So this is very important, that we don't deceive ourselves and just brush that off and say, well, that's not the answer. That wasn't what I wanted to hear. No? So just let's be completely open-minded to see that first we do not really know what we have asked. And of course, we might have difficulties to recognize his answer. But in that communication, we are very personally shown, so that we can understand exactly in the situation in which we find ourselves, what is the lesson to learn, what is there to look at. And of course, those are core concepts, how to deny the truth. So if you are looking really at core concepts of the ego, you're looking at separation thoughts, you're looking at fear thoughts, and you're touching at the very core of your human consciousness, the worthlessness of how that ego I sense is experiencing itself. So if I touch that worthless self, that worthless I, there's that is what all darkness is. And there's nothing there There's nothing there to find. There's nothing there to realize. There's nothing there to experience except the repetition of what has already been experienced over thousands and thousands of years, because as long as the ego was held dear and valuable, this was our experience, to experience ourselves as not deserving the grace of God, of not being not deserving miracles and what miracles bring about, not deserving love, simply on a human level, the same then in that open communication and connection with God's mind, with ultimately the love of God, and realizing there is only the love of God and nothing else. But even in our human relationships, in which we all learn and train our mind to accept to be loved and to see there is something in us that wants to love the brother, the next one, the children, the parents, the partner, husband, wife, doesn't matter in which definition that relationship is termed, but the need, the necessity to extend love, because there is a knowledge that there's truth in it, there's eternity in love itself. And of course, how would that work? How would that be possible if there is not love for myself, love for yourself? So we might start with love of ourselves and we might end up with love of our true self. But in between, those reflections which are accompanying us, which are walking with us literally into heaven, are our own self, isn't it? And recognizing my own self means here I have an opportunity. I'm practicing how to love myself and how to receive and accepting to be loved. And also that part is many, many times misinterpreted and not really understood, because it is looked at the imagery, at the appearance. And the ego is so vicious that it will first sell the concept of, hey, the appearance is your reality. In the appearances, in the object of appearances, the objective reality as you're holding it and made it up, therein is your only truth and only reality. And of course, there's nowhere God, there's nowhere higher power, there's nowhere something greater than ourself. There's nowhere a universal corrective principle. There's nowhere a spirit, a Holy Spirit, not to talk about a Christ within. It's all out there, it's all projected and placed in the ephemeral, in objective reality. So on that second day, so that there can be a revelatory experience, a true awakening, we decide for our true self. We decide for the holiness and the perfection in which we were created. And of course, that does need a good look at that what we call appearances. Now I'm going to go towards that manuscript in which I will just have a few ideas and share with you. But all appearances of images, and that is how the image can hide of not discovering who is the maker of the image, right? My thoughts are images that I have made, lesson 15, remember? And here is a clear indication. Nobody else made it, I made it. But if the appearance becomes important, if the appearance becomes the message instead of the message through the appearance, or only as the demonstration of an example of the appearance. And see, those are the differences. But all appearances of images are nothing else, nothing other than a medium, a device. Just take it as a device. It is transitory. It comes and goes. It changes all the time, right? It is a vehicle. And it is a vehicle that we only imagine. I only imagine an appearance so that I can use it. I can use it as a vehicle. And so they are all experienced as we begin to become aware of our transformation as being part of ourselves. It is then not a reality out there and put out there and stays out there, but it is a self-reflection. It is a recognition, okay, I'm looking at appearances and I'm actually looking into the mirror that reflects myself. Yeah, does that make sense? I guess so, isn't it? And so, but we used, of course, these images and appearances to know and define ourselves. But that wasn't true knowledge, That was just a projection, That was also just an idea of I would know who I am conceptually. And we used that especially in idols, projected onto idols, on the spiritual level, on the religious level, a very common practice over thousands and thousands of years. Thank you for this message of A Course in Miracles, of this message of Christ mind, because there is a true reversal, a true correction of that tendency to make up images and hold them dear, hold them as idols in your mind. And because to define yourself every moment, as you were making up the split mind, the separation. But now we can even use those same appearances in order to try to repair the separation. But that is what I said is a successful failure. Those are the ideas of repair, clues, of solutions we have brought with us from the past. And they only work temporarily. They only work again in the appearance in the world, but they leave you here as an I, as a self in time space, and therefore it's not a complete repair. No, we are going here for the miracle that will also undo completely our sense of being that separated self, right? Because that separated self is the sense of being in separation of God, right? And so being in separation of God means that the mind is split. And if mind is split, there is no oneness, there is no unification, there's no true self-recognition. Now, of course, I believe that the same as you did, as every human being does, and that the world's images could produce limited effects themselves. And in that sense, be a cause, right? That is really where the ego hides and the conceptual mind hides. It becomes so that the appearance, the objective reality becomes or is a belief to be a cause in itself, instead of an effect of our own faulty thinking. And so this is really an idea on which the human mind in separation suffers, no matter in which extent. You might say, I see that in 99% of what reflects in my mirror, or you will already see, okay, this is already changing, and I'm surrounded already more and more and more by those who share with me that acceptance that the cause is within me, that I am the cause of those appearances of the world I see. And I do no longer confuse this limited making up, inventing images with God made it, because that is how it was sold by the religions. And then, of course, where's the answer when, well, and is God responsible for the death and for the killing and for all the sickness and for all the dying? And, the answer on the religious establishment was, well, God gives and God takes. But that wasn't enough for me. It is, why would God take away something that I love? Why would God first create me as love itself and in his love, and then he would kill me as the love that he created? That's just not reasonable whatsoever. No? So we are laughing now about it, but those concepts of course are still very valid in minds who do not question that. And of course they are part of this doctrinal teachings of the churches and religious establishments. So thanks God that somehow we had found a way out. Maybe it was for a moment of being agnostic or even atheistic and not believing anything and questioning everything, including the reality of God. But that is still a personal experience as an universal experience in which we realize it's a realization of who I am, who we are. And in that realization, there's an experience that shows the all pervasiveness, the all presence that always has been there and always will be there as it is now. And I call that God. Could call it also just eternal presence or perfection, as thought itself, one thought, singular thought. And those are all terms that just name the one same experience in different ways. Now, once it is a game, right? Once the game of imagery, and not just one game, of course, a multiplicity of games. So once these games have been played out enough, that you know what it is. When you have played enough, you just know what it is, and it is played out enough within this world, in this world of separation, right, where your dualistic thoughts and mind is expressed or finds itself, then one finally becomes tired of playing, and of the game itself, and it as how children play. And when it is played over and over and over again, hide and seek, or whatever it is, you become tired of it. And finally becoming tired of the play, indulging the player's images of fighting and avoiding them. Those are the reactions how we play our game, especially in relationships, and that is when it comes to a fighting or it comes to a fleeing. That is really the psychology of the human mind as the animal consciousness, right? And in that moment, when that stops, right, when we are no longer willing to continue this game, continue playing, exactly in that instant, we are ready to make a decision. And it is a decision of seeing this differently, of experiencing ourselves differently. And above all, it is a decision for God, for experiencing our true self. So it is, as we already said before, it is the clarity of the decision. I have had enough of this. enough of this, right? And to no longer want or have use for what the game brought about, but also what was part of the game, of each game. It's called the play tools, right? We have used play tools in our relationship by judgment, by blaming, by projecting outside, by attacking, by defense, by protection, by in any way. You know it perfectly well. There's a list of it, right? But to say and to decide, I have enough and I have no use anymore of those play tools anymore, then there is this openness in the mind. I'm willing to be corrected. I'm willing to be undone. It is the beginning of the undoing process, right? It's a willingness that something that has been used for so long or forever can change and can be experienced from a completely different bottom, from a completely different source, coming from a different source. And all that we are asked then to do is to step aside, do not make these conditions, do not try to make it happen, do not be in charge and trying to to teach or to save yourself. No, you're just in the beginning step. We're talking here at this decision. I'm willing to be undone. To the expression of the willingness of the undoing process is also the declaration, I'm willing to step aside. Are you willing to step aside? Let's go there on the first day when we have made this decision. And you might maybe remember, oh, I started that 30 years ago, or when whatever time, or 3 days ago, or maybe 3 minutes ago. It's all the same. We are reviewing it and remembering it now, and that is what it counts. And so I'm willing to step aside. I'm willing to let that power coming from out of time, which is the power of Christ mind, which is the power of the Holy Spirit, to be in charge of that correction, of that undoing process. The healing comes through a miracle. We said that before, that we become willing, that it can be and should be a miracle. And we allowing, it is an allowance that is important, by allowing the Holy Spirit, by allowing the supreme power of God, let's say, right? By allowing divine grace to undo all illusions. This is the willingness to be undone in our self concept, in that sense of a limited self, of the ego I, in the undoing of all illusions. And so to make space for a revelatory occurrence, to reveal its love, to reveal love that is pure love, that is only love, that is true love, love through our own act. And that is an action of forgiveness and acceptance. They are going hand in hand. If I'm willing to go along with that allowance, I'm also willing, I become aware that I can accept what is going to happen, what is going on, and what the outcome will be. And so that acceptance is in connection with what forgiveness offers us. Because through that acceptance, I can no longer pretend or do as if the past would be the focus or would be valuable for me. But I'm then clearly directed towards looking through the past. And it requires finally a complete letting go, which is called surrender, right? A surrendering of our own will, that what we considered that what our own will was, and that we can do what we want to do, and we surrender that to God. We surrender it to gratitude, to true gratitude. and owning all of our experience of love. As I said, to also allow to be loved as we love, but to own that this is what I am, and giving it all away, extending it as what it really is: love, light, peace. You can call it as you want, you know. So I wasn't asked, you're also not asked to have any concern about the appearances in the world. Let them be as they are. Let them be as insane as they are, because the ego is insane. And what is made up as a reality by the ego's thought system will represent an insane world. It is our job through that change, through that undoing process, to see that there is another way of looking at the world, that we can see a world that reflects in the mirror the peace and love and light that we truly are. So don't be concerned about the world's appearance. Yeah, all that we are asked. I was asked of that. You are asked also. If it is new to you, then see it that you are asked right now by me is to get out of the way, right? To step aside, get out of the way, allow the Spirit, the divine Spirit, the Holy Spirit in us, in you, in me, to take care, to guide you home, to show you your purest reflection of the one mind that we are. And you're thinking in the one mind, you can call your own one mindedness, your own true self, as your self, your total self. Now, I will continue reading something from the Urtext, from the Course in Miracles, from this original edition, as we were already sharing. I'm not sure if it was the last time or 2 episodes before, and from chapter 3, from the fourth section of chapter 3. I will continue here how he continued, and maybe add something on, because he starts even talking about Freud, Sigmund Freud, right? My friend and psychologist, just a little bit more than 100 years ago, and Vienna, Austria, right? The father of psychotherapy, you could say, we could say. And he mentions there, and he actually shows us that it didn't really reveal all that he discovered into this what the Course is showing us, because he himself was defending or protecting himself in a limited thought form and was in fear. But first, and he talks about this, where the term right-mindedness is used. And Jesus says that the term right-mindedness is properly used as the correction for wrong-mindedness. And this is what we are talking today, that correction and the allowance for the correction, right? And the correction for wrong-mindedness, and applies to the state of mind which induces accurate perception. And it is miraculous because it heals misperception. This is what we are about. This is what we have asked for, that all misperception is going to be healed. And healing is indeed a miracle in view of how man perceives himself. Only the sick need healing. Only the sick, because sickness is in the mind. Healing also is in the mind. The soul, see, that is a word that has been then changed into spirit. The soul does not need healing, but the mind does, right? Or it was changed and edited into mind. But see, here soul is really also the light, the energetic part of who we are and how we experience love and give love. The soul does not need healing. The soul is perfect in itself, but it is the conceptual mind that does. And here it goes into, which is only in the urtext. Freud gave a very graphic but upside down account of how the divisions of the mind across arose from the bottom up. They came up from the bottom up. Actually, this is impossible because the unconscious, that is what Freud contributed, as you know. He discovered, or he was terming, that things would arise from the unconscious mind, right? Especially, he was then the specialist in all, tracing it back to sexual desires coming from the unconscious mind. So this is what Jesus tells us about it. Because the unconscious cannot create the conscious, right? See, consciousness is what is present. You're always conscious in truth. Even if you're sleeping, you are conscious, right? So the unconsciousness cannot create the conscious. You cannot create something you can't know. Freud was greatly worried about this, being very bright, though misguided, and attempted to get around it by introducing a number of borderline areas which merely resulted in fussiness. But I'm not so educated in that, so I cannot really explain to you how he, but a borderline area is maybe exactly in this sexual fantasy stuff. That's a kind of a borderline area, maybe in the understanding, but it resulted in fussiness. And this was particularly unfortunate, Jesus says, because he was capable of going much higher if he had not been, and here it is, if he had not been so afraid. This is why he kept pulling the mind down. The ego did not arise out of the unconscious. What a statement, isn't it? The ego did not arise out of the unconscious. A lower order perception cannot create a higher order one, which is the way you perceive the structure of the psyche if you look at it from the bottom up. This is in parentheses. Because it doesn't understand it. But a higher order perception can create a lower order one by understanding it in terms of misperception. And now just one few sentences and then we're going to leave it for today. Perception, because this is what the realm is about. It's about perception. Perception always involves some misuse of will because it involves the mind in areas of uncertainty. Again, perception always involves some misuse of will because it involves the mind in areas of uncertainty. The mind is very active because it has willpower. Willpower, power of mind. When it willed the separation, it willed to perceive. You see, this is how you made it up in your mind. Actually, in your conscious mind, you willed to perceive, you willed first to be separate, and you willed it by power of thought. It actually starts, as I always say, with the sense of I exist. I am what I am in time space, in a body, as a body. That is already the expression of the separation, of course. Until it chose to do this, the mind, it willed only to know, right? Knowledge is of God. Knowledge is pure alignment with the truth. Knowledge is universal. Before that was made up to will to perceive, we only willed to know. Afterwards, it had to will ambiguously, and the only way out of ambiguity is clear perception. And this is what we are sharing now. You see, the undoing process and the willingness for correction and for the undoing is the yes for clear perception. And that clear perception is a new perception. That new perception is a miracle minded way of seeing. That miracle minded way of seeing is the way of seeing as the Holy Spirit sees it. So, this is how we um, are going home, literally, how we experience ourselves in that willingness to be corrected by a higher power. And so thank you so much for following me with that for a moment in this series of 3 Days to Awakening. And I'm just grateful for this really high teaching as we receive it through Jesus Christ mind, our own whole mind, right, from out of time, and just restoring ourselves to love, and us in this way remembering that all we have to do and all we have is love and nothing else. So I love you. Here is just a few more sounds to get out of here. Thank you.